Okay, so here I am modeling Gary Fisher's costume.
Who the hell is Gary Fischer?
And I wanted to have some hard edges on this because his suit does have some hard edges on it. Now, I could have tried to sculpt this. The problem with that is it would have been really impossible for my machine to handle. To get that hard edge in sculpting is possible, but you have to remesh to a super high level, and my machine just could not hack it. It's just too many vertices, no good. So how was I going to do this? Here was my brainstorm. I box model the edges that I need and then sink the other half into the model, boolean it all together, and then blend it in. Right? That was my brilliant plan. Now, there were concerns with this plan. We all know Blender and Booleans can sometimes be tricky. And something like this, I don't really have as much, leeway with what I do. Like, this is a costume. It's pretty much got to stay where it is. There are some tricks that I can pull sometimes to get Booleans to work when they're difficult. But the problem comes when it's items that can't be moved, can't be shifted. Thankfully, all these Boolean unions worked perfectly. There was no issues, so I was cool. Everything went together perfectly, and what you see me here is modeling the tops of his overalls. Now I think I'm about to do I'm doing his eyes. Now, the one thing I wish I would have made him a little squintier. I left those red things too circular. If you look at the reference, which you can find online easily, that's a pretty famous scene from the Venture Brothers. It's just before he fight Brock. But if you look at that, his eyes are a little squintier, and it made him look a little madder. And somehow I just missed that when I was doing the modeling. But I still think it came out pretty good. And here you see me working on the hands. I do the hands the same way pretty much every time. Here they're a little boxier, but they were boxier on purpose. I wanted him to look like he was wearing gloves. It comes out a little more stylized than usual, but I kind of like the look, so I was cool with it. And basically, I just model each finger separately, and then sculpt each item. Hit the Dynato or hit the remesh to up the vertices count, and then smooth it out a little bit. Put in a little detail that you could do in box modeling, would be much harder, and then boolean each finger individually to the hand. And it works. It works really, really well. Even if you have to move the fingers around a little bit before you remesh them, I just kind of make a 3-segmented rectangle that I can bend. I have vertices at each knuckle where I can bend the fingers. And then I just sculpt in some detail after I remesh it. So it works really, really well. It gives you a good opportunity to step back, look at the hand, and make sure you got all the proportions of the fingers right, which I always find helpful. I always need to make sure that everything's down right. And here you see me adding a little detail to the hand. And now we're going to go to the other hand, and it's pretty much the same thing. I find this technique works super well, right? Really, really easy. Putting in the palm, putting in some more detail. The only hassle you have with this, right? And I usually join things like the hands or the feet, if the toes are visible, I always join them to the model absolutely last, because then you can't remesh anymore. Because the fingers and the toes are too close together, and if you remesh, they will join, right? There will no longer be spaces between the fingers or the toes. Sometimes you can sculpt them in a little bit, but it's tricky. It's definitely tough to do, so I try to do it at the very, very end, the last join, so that I don't have to redo the whole thing. But other than that, this works really, really well. See me doing the fingers, right? Putting it back in some detail. Trying to make them look a little more like gloves. Definitely helps when I painted the model afterwards. But It definitely works really, really well, and I would suggest it. I just find it works great. You know, the only tricky thing is you see the spaces between the fingers. You really can't get too close in there. But generally, if you can't get in there to sculpt it or resculpt it or smooth it, you can't see it anyway. So it typically doesn't matter. And here you go. We got 2 more fingers left to join. I'm just doing a little last detail on the fingers. And here we go. Here's your last finger in there. Now we're adding some knuckles in, little pads underneath the hand. And here I am now working on his cowl, right? That lip around his nose and mouth. And I wish I would have made this a little thicker. That's one of the things that I always find is tough with sculpting digitally, because you really don't have any frame of reference. You know, you don't know how thick, how big. Like, this figure could be 2 inches big or it could be 20 inches tall. You really don't know, and there's a lot of times where you just kind of you gotta judge it as best you can. And I wish I would have made this a little thicker. I really just wanted a basic line, and I kind of got that, but it was a little more subtle than I really would have wanted. But it worked out well enough. And I was really kind of rolling the dice with this idea of box modeling and then joining it. I was really afraid it wouldn't work, and then I don't know what I would have done because I don't know any other way to do this. Like I say, my computer could definitely not handle the resolution that this would have to be in order to try to sculpt that in. Plus, it would take a buttload of time to do all those hard edges by hand in sculpt mode. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it would take a real high resolution and a real lot of time. And I didn't want to do it that way. Really didn't want to do it that way. Hopefully soon I will be able to get my hands on a newer computer and I will be able to tackle some more interesting stuff, because I am kind of limited. My computer's about 13 years old, so I'm really pretty much limited to what I can tackle. I can only go so high with the vertices count before my machine becomes... I mean, it'll still work, but everything gets so slow and chunky that it is definitely hard to work on. Now, let's see, what am I doing here? I think I'm starting he's like wearing a t-shirt with ripped sleeves, and that's what I'm starting here. I wasn't really sure how I was going to manage this. It also ended up coming out a little stylized, but I kind of like it. Oh, here we go. Taking a step back, I'm going to join the arms to the figure now. And you're still seeing this sped up. So I always like to save the file before I do the major joins, and then save as. I always stress this. You should work, in like file 1, file 2, file 3. You always want to be able to go back a step if you need to, because a lot of this stuff you're setting it in stone, and you can't undo it unless you have a previous file to go back to. And there are times where I do need to go back. So it's always good to save versions of your file. Plus, stuff gets corrupted, stuff happens. It's always good to have extra versions of your file. It's always good to save copies. I have 3 backup disks, 3 external hard drives that I save stuff to just in case. And it has saved my butt in certain occasions. I do something, I make a mistake, I accidentally save it. I have the file in 3 other places that I can go back to get whatever I need from. So it does come in handy. And hard drives are cheap nowadays, so it's not that big a deal. And you see me starting to work on the rip sleeve, but I think I picked that up in a little later date. We're finishing the hard edges of the overalls that he's kind of wearing. This is a funny suit. Okay, and that's pretty much it for this video. I will be back with a little more in-depth stuff Be sure to, subscribe, like, comment, and all that good stuff.